Thank you for joining us online here at Fam Church as we begin our new series, Hope, and our lead pastor, Brian Lane.
These two games. And it was just like, it was very frustrating, and I got kind of mad. I was upset. I wasn't happy. But did anybody get me mad on purpose? Did Dish Network and the NFL plot against me to keep from receiving the game? No. Did God come against me and form a thunderstorm over my house so that I wouldn't see the game? Probably not. I can't conclude yes on that one, okay? But probably not, because you know what? Weather just happens, okay? Weather just happens. God's not out there going, okay, I'll give them a storm, I'll make them dry. I just think weather happens. That's how He set this place up. And so nobody was there to make me mad. But sometimes we make people mad on purpose, don't we? Have you ever been in a spot where you make somebody mad on purpose? I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. But I've done that before. I mean, I think everybody in this room can say at one point or another, they've made somebody mad on purpose. You know, you just saw them getting a little ticked off, so you stuck a little dig in there just to make them a little bit more mad, or you knew that if you did this or did that, that they would get kind of ticked off about it. And so we've made people mad on purpose, and I was trying to think of a time to illustrate this when I had done this. And I knew I had done this, but I just couldn't think of anything. But then God was looking down upon me on Friday, and He gave me the greatest illustration. Okay, now I didn't make somebody mad on Friday. That's not what I'm saying. But somebody intentionally went out to make me mad. We don't have garbage pickup at our house. We take the garbage to the recycling center. It's only a few miles from our house, and so it's just easier for me. It saves me $25 a month. Not that that's a big deal, but it saves me money, so I just run it over to the recycling center once a week and dump my garbage. Not a big deal. And so on Friday, I was taking my garbage from the house over to the recycling center. And I pull in, drop my garbage, and I pull out. Well, as I'm sitting at the exit to the recycling center, I'm about to turn left on a road called Baseline. There was a line of cars in front of me, and the light turns green, and we start to go. Well, there was this lady in front of me in a minivan from New York. And I don't know if the minivan and New York have anything to do with this, but she decided that she was in absolutely no hurry to do anything. She wasn't even in a hurry to make the light. When the light turned green, she lifted her foot off the gas pedal and set both of her feet on the floorboard, I think, and she just slowly coasted this way, okay? And so we made the turn onto Baseline. I'm sitting there going, what is she doing? And so the speed limit on Baseline is 55. And so she is rocketing along at 35 miles an hour on Baseline. And I am saying to myself, what is this lady doing? I didn't get it. I didn't understand why she was doing this. Well, about a half a mile up the road, there's another light. And so she pulls into the right turn lane to make a turn. And I'm thinking to myself, finally, freedom, you know? And so she gets into the turn lane. All of a sudden, I see her look in her rearview mirror, look back at me, and swerve her car back over. Seriously. Okay? And so I slam on my brakes because I was getting ready to go around her and head up the road. And so she moves back over into the lane, and I start to go again, and she does the same thing. She swerves her car over at me and then is looking in her rearview mirror the whole time to try and get my reaction. Now, what's amazing is the first thought that came to my head was, sweet, I've got an illustration for this message on Sunday. I mean, that's what I was thinking when she was doing this. But sometimes we make people mad on purpose. She was trying to make me mad on purpose. Well, there's a story that we're going to look at this morning where Jesus goes and makes somebody mad on purpose. And some of you are probably saying to yourself, uh-oh, he's up there speaking heresy. Jesus never got mad, did he? He was the gentlest, calmest guy. He just always chilled out. Nothing affected him. Just the waves washed over him, and he was in peace, right? Is that the picture? I hope that's not your picture, because that's not what Jesus was like. Jesus, on occasion, got mad. If you need any evidence for that, you can just turn to the places where he went into the temple, okay? And I've always used this as an illustration. How would you guys feel if on a Sunday morning I just walked in here, fashioned a whip, and started beating people? Anyone okay with that? But Jesus did this. He did this on one occasion when he cleared the temple. He threw over tables, he made a whip, and started whipping at people, trying to get them out of the temple, okay? So Jesus got ticked off. And there's nothing wrong with being mad. That's what we've got to understand. There's nothing wrong with being mad. The problem comes in how we express our anger in situations, okay? That's when anger becomes a problem, how we express it. And so what we're going to look at this morning is we are going to look at the story of Lazarus found in John chapter 11. So if you want to turn to John chapter 11 in your Bibles, and we're going to look at the story of where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. And the reason that I want to look at this is because as we're getting close to Easter, I know a lot of the events that we think of when we think of Easter, we think of Jesus' triumphal entry, people shouting Hosanna, him praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, and him being arrested and cutting off a priest's ear, and all of these thoughts come to mind when we think of the time right before Easter, but I think this is an important event. This is something that is important and integral to the events of Easter because it took place only 2 weeks before Jesus' arrest. And it was also a picture that Jesus was trying to paint of what was actually going to happen with him and his life when he rose from the dead. And this was also the this was also the event that solidified the religious leaders really wanting to arrest Jesus and crucify him, okay? This was the big event that they finally said, you know what? We've had enough of this dude. He's raising people from the dead. All kinds of people saw it. We got to do something about it. And so we're going to read John chapter 11. We're going to read verses 1 through 48. And I know that's a lot of scripture, but I couldn't figure a way to edit this down in any way. And so this is what it says. It says, "Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sister sent word to Jesus, 'Lord, the one you love is sick.' When he heard this, Jesus said, 'This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it.' Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, 'Let us go again back to Judea.' 'But Rabbi,' they said, 'a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you are going back there?' Jesus answered, 'Are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light.' After he had said this, he went on to tell them, 'Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, and I am going there to wake him up.' His disciples replied, 'Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better.' Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, 'Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him.' Then Thomas, called Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, 'Let us also go, that we may die with him.' On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and to Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. 'Lord,' Martha said to Jesus, 'if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know even now God will give you whatever you ask.' Jesus said to her, 'Your brother will rise again.' Martha answered, 'I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day.' Jesus said, 'I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?' 'Yes, Lord,' she told him, 'I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world.' And after she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. 'The teacher is here,' she said, 'and is asking for you.' When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out to him, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was, she saw him, she fell at his feet and said, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.' When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. 'Where have you laid him?' he asked. 'Come and see,' they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, 'See how he loved him?' But some of them said, 'Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?' Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. 'Take away the stone,' he said. 'But Lord,' said Martha, the sister of the dead man, 'but this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days.' Then Jesus said, 'Did I not tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God?' So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, 'Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me.' When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, 'Lazarus, come out!' The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, 'Take off the grave clothes and let him go.' Therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did, put their faith in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. "What are we accomplishing?" they asked. "Here is this man performing many miraculous signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." So, there's so much good stuff in this text. I mean, this is a section that we could spend weeks on breaking down all of the information that's there. But for today, we're going to focus on a couple of things. And these verses start with a section of Scripture with Jesus hanging out with his disciples, and the word comes that their friend Lazarus has died, okay, or is sick. They're there, and they get this word that Lazarus is sick, and so Jesus, instead of getting up and heading off to go and heal Lazarus, instead, the Bible says that he sits there and he stays there just chilling out with him and his disciples for 2 more days. Okay, nobody understands why he's hanging out there. The disciples don't get it. They think the reason that Jesus is hanging out there is not because he's got something greater in store for Lazarus, but they think the reason he's hanging out there is because he's afraid of the Jews. He's afraid that if he goes back to Jerusalem, back to Bethany, back to Judea, that somebody is going to be waiting there. They're going to grab him and they're going to kill him, and that's going to be the end of Jesus. That's what the disciples think are going on in Jesus' mind. But see, this has nothing to do with why Jesus is not going to meet with Lazarus and heal him. See, it was all about God's plan for the situation. And see, many times in God's plan in our life, it kind of looks like this situation. It kind of looks like this spot right here. We are sitting there. We are with Jesus. We are trying to figure out what's going on, and we come to a conclusion about God's plans, about God's purposes, and we come to a different conclusion. We come to a different response or a different place than where Jesus actually wants us to be at. We say to ourselves, we've got this, we understand what's going on, but in reality, we don't know totally what Jesus is doing in the situation. We get an idea in our head, and we misunderstand what God is saying. That's exactly what the disciples did here. So finally, Jesus gets up and says, all right, we are going to head out, and we are going to go to Bethany, and we're going to check on our boy Lazarus. All right, and so they head out, and Jesus arrives there, and guess what? People are ticked off at Jesus. I mean, Mary is really ticked off at Jesus. Mary is so ticked at Jesus that she doesn't even bother going and meeting him when he arrives in town. Martha gets up and goes and finds Jesus. However, Mary stays there. And I'm sure she was thinking to herself, oh, this dude, this bum, finally shows up, okay? He's a few days too late. He's a few days too late. He could have done something about it a few days ago, but now that he's here, there's absolutely nothing that he can do. And so she was mad. She was frustrated. And I'm sure she was thinking to herself, you know what? When Jesus used to come to our house, because if you look in the Bible, Jesus and his disciples, a lot of times when they needed a break from ministry, they didn't go back to Jesus' mom's house. I mean, how many of you go to mom when you need a break? Anybody still go to mom when you need a break? Yeah, you go to mom's house when you need a break. But Jesus, when he needed a break, when his disciples need a break, if you look in the Bible, they did not go to Jesus' mom's house. They went to Mary, Martha, and Lazarus' house. Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they fed Jesus and the disciples. They took care of them. They gave them a bed to sleep in, a place to stay, some place to be at, to get rest and to recuperate, to head out to do the ministry that God was calling them to do. And Mary is probably sitting there thinking to herself, man, all the stuff I did for Jesus, all the care that I gave Jesus and the disciples when they were here at my house, and then when I need him the most, where is he? He's nowhere to be found. And I'm sure that that's what was going through Mary's head. I mean, haven't we been in those situations where we've served somebody, where we've cared for somebody, where we've done stuff for somebody, and then when we needed them, when we needed something from them, suddenly they're nowhere to be found? I think we've all encountered people like that. And I think that's what was going on. Mary thought that this was who Jesus was all of a sudden. Jesus was this guy who, when they needed him the most, he didn't bother showing up. And it was frustrating. It made her angry. It made her upset. She felt used by Jesus, and so she was mad at Jesus. And the thing is that the people that are there to comfort Mary and Martha don't help the situation either. I mean, if you look at the friends that are gathered around them, the friends that they have at the house there, helping them and comforting them and trying to give them peace, they start talking all kinds of junk. I mean, look at what they say. If he hadn't been here, if this dude who supposedly loved Lazarus so much had been here, he wouldn't be dead right now. This guy's a bum. I mean, even the friends were talking trash about Jesus. But the truth is, in this situation, is that Jesus kind of made them mad on purpose. He didn't show up on purpose. He wasn't there on purpose, just like the lady in front of me when I was driving on Friday. And you may be thinking to yourself, but how can you say that? I mean, why would God want to make anyone mad on purpose? Why would God want to get anyone upset on purpose? Because they knew that they saw Jesus as their only hope. They knew that they saw Jesus as the only way that they could get healing. And so why didn't God do it? I mean, this goes against everything that we think about God, with his children, with those he loves, with those he cares for. You know, why would he do this? Why would he treat them like this? Well, the deal is this. The reason God did that was because he knew that something greater was in store for them and the family, and ultimately for God and God's purposes. See, he was holding out. He was holding on for something greater. And it would have been cool if Jesus had come and healed Lazarus, and Lazarus would have never died. That would have been that would have been an incredible miracle. But see, there was a purpose beyond Lazarus, beyond Mary and Martha. See, if Jesus had shown up and just healed Lazarus, who would have been there to see the healing? Mary, Martha, Lazarus, maybe a couple of the friends that were there to help them when their brother was suffering. But who was there when Jesus showed up? The Bible says many of the Jews, many of the people from that city that they lived in showed up at Martha and Mary's house and were hanging out there the day Jesus showed up. And God wanted that kind of audience because he was about to do something super amazing and super incredible. He was about to take somebody and raise them back to life. He was making a statement to the people. He was making the statement, if you have been wondering if I am the Son of God, here is your answer right here. This man is coming back from the dead. But see, what we miss in this story is this little point of him being in the grave 4 days. This is kind of important because the Jews back then, they had this belief. And this belief was that when you died, for 3 days, your spirit hung out by your body. Okay? So your body is laying there dead and your spirit's just kind of, I don't know, over here on a stool, maybe drinking Starbucks. I don't know what, it's just hanging out there, okay? So you got your spirit over there hanging out. On the 4th day is when the spirit leaves and departs and goes to its eternal destination. Okay? The reason that he left after the 3rd day was because by that time, rot and decay starts to set in on your body. And so the spirit figured at that point there was no hope of you coming back to life. And so the spirit figured it would leave. And that was a Jewish belief at the time. And so Jesus, in coming there, he was coming at a place and a point where the Jews knew that there was nothing anybody could do in that situation, where there was nothing that anything could do in this universe for that situation except for the living God. The only one who could raise this person back to life was the true, the living God. That's it. No other way, no other hope. He was declaring to the nation, he was declaring to the Jews that he was God, that he had the answers, that he was the source of life and hope. Only God could redeem a body at that point. See, this was bigger than Lazarus being healed. This was way bigger than Lazarus being healed. This was Mary, Martha, the nation knowing that God is there, God has a plan, and it might be a little different than you think it is. See, and when the things that happen in our life, I think Jesus is speaking the exact same thing. Jesus is saying that there are going to be things that happen in our life. There are going to be things that we're going to pray about and ask God to intervene in those situations. There are going to be times where we are going to be desperate for God to do something and it's not going to happen like we think it should. Mary and Martha thought Jesus should have come and healed. Jesus did something in a different way. But we have to realize in those situations that there is hope. What is the hope in those situations? The hope in those situations is that God is there, God is in control of the situation, and God has a plan. Too often we think God does not have a plan because He doesn't do it our way. But God is there, God has a plan, and His plan is going to be better. It's going to be just the best possible plan. And I know that when we're standing in the middle of that, when we're standing in the middle of those situations, we're saying to ourselves, how, God, how can this be the best possible plan? That's not what I'm looking for. I think it should be this way. God, I think you should do this. I think you should do that. When we're standing there in the middle of the pain, when we're standing there in the middle of the hurt, when we're standing there in the middle of our suffering, we're going to be saying to ourselves, God, this can't be you. You are not doing anything. I don't think there's a plan here. But God, in order for us to see the big picture, we need to stand back, look at what's going on around us, and say, God, what is the bigger thing that you are doing here? Because that's ultimately God's point, God's goal, and God's purpose. God knows how that thing's going to end. God knew how that thing was going to end. God knows how the situation you are in is going to end. He has the hope in those situations. So if you're standing in the middle of hurt, if you are standing in the middle of pain, if you are standing in the middle of something in your life that you didn't plan for, that you weren't expecting, that you've been praying and asking God to come and heal and come and repair, but it hasn't happened, know this. If you are a follower of Jesus, there is something greater in that situation. There is something bigger in that situation than what we think. However, if we get mad, if we walk out, if we walk away, we're going to miss it. There's hope. Jesus has a plan in our rough situation. It may seem like He's making us mad on purpose. It may seem like He's ticking us off on purpose. But if we see it through, if we follow His plan, something greater is in store at the end. There is hope in the plan of God, whatever the situation or whatever the mess is that you find yourself in. And the second thing that I think gives us hope here is that even in situations that seem hopeless, God can and still will perform miracles. See, Jesus, when He does arrive, He shows up in the middle of this mourning period. And the Jews had, part of how their funerals worked was when you died, they put you in the grave right away. You know, they would cut it out of rock and they would put you in it. They didn't put you in the ground. They would cut it out of rock. They would put you in the grave that way. And then they would begin this period called Shiva. And Shiva is the Hebrew word for 7. And it was just 7 days of mourning where they would take 7 days, the family, the close relatives, they would just spend their time receiving guests, having people come in to give them comfort, to give them peace in their time of pain and hurt. Now, a little side note for this, Jesus and funerals, okay? Let's talk about that for a minute. Jesus, do you guys know that at every funeral Jesus showed up at, somebody get raised from the dead? Okay, there was not a funeral that Jesus showed up at that He just wore His black tunic and listened to people say some kind words about the person. There was never a funeral that Jesus showed up at and helped to roll the rock in front of the grave. Every funeral that we've got recorded in the Bible that Jesus showed up at, somebody came back to life. Okay? I mean, that's crazy if you think about it. And most people probably wouldn't want to invite Jesus to the funeral because do you want that going on at your funeral? You know, you invite Jesus to the funeral, somebody's coming back from the dead, running around. I mean, that just gets all crazy, right? People just don't want that. And this is what we got to know about Jesus. He was just not a safe guy to bring around your house and hang out with your friends. Okay, he was not a safe dude. I know we love safety here in America. We love everything to be safe, right? Well, if you want to follow Jesus, things aren't going to be safe. They may get a little crazy. They may get a little wild. They may get a little out there. If you want a safe life, don't follow Jesus, because he makes things as unsafe as possible. Now, it's not saying that you're going to be walking down the street with Jesus and he's going to say, hey, let's go knock off this 7-Eleven and steal some money. That's not the kind of crazy I'm talking about with Jesus, okay? But what I'm talking about is you'll be out, you'll be going someplace, Jesus will heal somebody on the wrong day at the wrong time, and suddenly everybody wants to stone you to death or arrest you. That's the kind of crazy that Jesus had going on. But I've gotten off track. But yeah, Jesus... he's crazy. He raises people from the dead at every funeral he goes to. And so Jesus shows up during the Shiva period, and he plans on bringing the ultimate comfort to the family, bringing their loved one back to life. But before this happens, Jesus and Martha start this whole conversation, and he tries to explain to her that he is there to raise him from the dead, but Martha just can't wrap her brain around this thing. Okay, Martha can't understand what Jesus is saying, and they head out to the tomb, and Jesus asks to move the stone, says, move that stone away, and they still don't get what's going on. They still don't understand what is happening there, and Martha doesn't want the stone to be moved. She tells them that it's going to smell bad because Lazarus has been in there for 4 days. She doesn't seem to believe the words that she had just spoken, that God will give Jesus whatever he asks for. She doesn't seem to think that God can bring Lazarus back from the dead. Her belief about Jesus doesn't match her thoughts and actions. She said she believed Jesus could do anything, but when then Jesus went to do it, she tries to stop him from the miracle. She looked at the situation from her own perspective, with her human limitations, and failed to grasp that God was in control of everything and was standing by, that God who was in control of everything was standing by her side. All she could see was the fact that her brother was laying in the grave and he was dead. All she could see was that it had been 4 days since he had been laid in the tomb, and didn't understand why Jesus was talking. And if she didn't get it, she didn't think there was any hope anymore. There was nothing Jesus could do at this point. There was no miracle that Jesus could perform to fix this situation. And see, when we face situations that look impossible, we get the same way. We look at them from our earthly, from our human perspective, and we look at situations and we say, you know what? God cannot do anything in that situation. God cannot move. God cannot work. Yeah, I know all these stories and stuff that's contained in here, but I just don't think God can do it anymore. We get exactly like Martha gets when it comes to miracles. But I want you to know this morning, there is no situation that is too hopeless for Jesus. Okay? There is no situation that he can't fix, restore, and redeem. Maybe you walked in here this morning and you were at a doctor's this week and the doctor had said there is nothing that can be done for the sickness that's in your body. Guess what? Yes, there still is something that can be done. Jesus still has the power to heal in that spot. Maybe your husband or your wife has asked for a divorce. It doesn't look like there's any hope of restoring the marriage and bringing it back together. But guess what? Jesus is still in the miracle business, and he can still restore that relationship. Jesus can fix anything. Maybe you've come in here with financial troubles. Jesus is there and he can fix that. There's nothing beyond his ability to fix. Or maybe you came in and you're just weighted down by life. The chains of life just seem to be weighing you down and have you heavy and burdened, and you're not sure what you're going to do with this thing. It's just sitting there heavy on your life. There's hope in Jesus, because there's nothing Jesus can't fix. Don't look at your own limitations to solve the problems and challenges you face, because guess what that's going to do? That is going to steal all of your hope. Instead, look to Jesus, who has no limitations. Look to Jesus, who has nothing keeping him back, who still works miracles today and can work a miracle in your situation. Rob, if you want to come on back up. And I think there's some of us that maybe feel this morning like Jesus is out there making us mad on purpose. You know, Jesus is out there just wailing us with life, and it seems like there's no hope. It seems like there's no help. Can I tell you this morning, that is not the case. Jesus is not trying to make us mad. He's not trying to steal our hope because of what is going on in our life and what we are going through. We need to look at it from a different perspective. We need to see it from God's perspective. God is saying, you know what? I have a plan in your situation. This plan may not look like the plan you think it should be. This plan may not come out like how you think it should come out. It may not look anything like that, but I still have a plan, and it's going to be greater, it's going to be more powerful, and it's going to be more amazing than you can grasp or comprehend with your brain. And Jesus is also saying, you know what? I am also there to heal. I mean, I was just so excited when I saw that we were doing the song Healer this morning. I mean, it had to have been, God talking to Rob and just letting him know where we were coming from, what we're going to be speaking on this morning. But God still has the power to heal regardless of the situation, regardless of the circumstance. He can still heal. It never gets to a point in our life where we get beyond God's power to heal, restore, and redeem any situation. And so if you've gotten yourself to that place, if you've gotten yourself to that point where you're saying to yourself, God, I don't know, I don't understand, I can't grasp this thing, know that God has a plan. Go to Him and say, God, what is your plan? Speak to me, show me, lead me, guide me, help me to move down this path so that I don't get out there, and lose hope because I've grabbed a hold of my plan and am walking with my plan. And the second thing is, if you need healing this morning, God says He can and He still will heal. He's not leaving you. He's not forgetting you. He's not forsaking you. He's got the power to heal in whatever situation, whatever circumstance you find yourself in this morning. And so this morning, in closing, I just want to ask everyone to close their eyes. And the first question that I want to ask this morning is this. I've been standing up here and I've been talking about Jesus this whole time, and you're saying to yourself, what is Jesus? Who is Jesus? Why are you talking about Jesus and God? 2,000 years ago, God, in order to fix this messed up world that we lived in, sent His Son to this earth to die and raise again so that we could have life. And how does that work? It's like we've got this messed up thing inside of us called sin. And what happens is God comes through Jesus and takes that sin away from us and puts Himself in there so that we come alive on the inside. And I know it sounds kind of weird, it sounds kind of different, but God lives on the inside of us when we give our lives to Jesus. And He leads us, and He guides us, and He helps us with our life.